G'day everybody, my name is Lowell and welcome to the channel. So we've got a reaction video for us today. This is going to be 50 Florida geography facts you never knew. So let's jump in and let's have a look at this one.
Florida is a state defined by water, sculpted by storms, and constantly remade by the forces of nature. From a satellite view, its landscape seems deceptively simple. A flat, green finger of land pointing into the Caribbean, surrounded by shimmering blue. But the reality on the ground is far stranger, deeper, and more dynamic than most people ever realize. Beneath the beaches and the theme parks, Florida hides ancient fossilized reefs, rivers that flow through solid rock, vast underwater grasslands, and ecosystems that change by the hour. It's a place where the line between the land and the sea is often just an illusion. Today, we're traveling from the Panhandle to the Keys to explore 50 Florida geography facts that'll completely transform the way you see the Sunshine State. Fact 50.
Hey, Queensland, where I live, is called the Sunshine State too, because we get plenty of bloody sun, that's for sure.
The only peninsula with two coasts facing two different seas. Florida is the only state in the contiguous United States that boasts extensive coastlines on two entirely different bodies of water, the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. This isn't just a matter of naming conventions. These are two distinct marine worlds. The Atlantic coast is high energy, sculpted by powerful waves and the deep, fast-moving ocean. The Gulf Coast, by contrast, is a lower energy system, characterized by warmer, shallower waters and finer sands. This geographic duality gives Florida two separate climates, two distinct tidal patterns, and two completely different marine ecosystems on a single peninsula.
It kind of reminds me of a lot of Queensland at the moment. I'm loving it.
Fact 49. The flattest state in America. There's a common misconception that Kansas is the flattest state in the Union. In reality, that title belongs to Florida. The state's topography is so subtle that it's almost imperceptible. The highest natural point in the entire state, Britton Hill, rises just 345 feet above sea level. To put that in perspective, many skyscrapers in downtown Miami are taller than the state's highest mountain.
So, I wonder if they get a lot of flooding then, if it's so close to sea level.
Many skyscrapers in downtown Miami are taller than the state's highest mountain. If you melted the polar ice caps, Florida would be the first landmass to effectively vanish, as its average elevation is only about 100 feet. Fact 48. The state built on ancient coral reef. When you walk through the streets of Miami or drive through the Keys, you're literally walking on the skeletons of ancient sea creatures. Much of southern Florida rests on a bedrock known as the Miami limestone. This rock is not formed from compressed sand, but from a massive fossilized coral reef and oolitic shoals that existed around 125 years ago when sea levels were much higher. Essentially, the Florida peninsula.
Only 125 years ago?
25 years ago when sea levels were much higher. Essentially, the Florida peninsula is the calcified remains of a tropical ocean that dried out. Fact 47. A peninsula created by rising seas. The shape of Florida that we recognize on a map is just a temporary snapshot in geologic time. The underlying landmass, known as the Florida Platform, is actually twice as wide as the current state. During the last ice age, when ocean water was locked up in glaciers, Florida's west coast extended another 100 miles into the Gulf of Mexico. Conversely, during interglacial periods, the state has been reduced to a tiny chain of islands. Florida is a shapeshifter, constantly growing and shrinking at the mercy of the global thermostat. Fact 46. The Gulf Stream Superhighway. Just a few miles off Florida's east coast flows the Gulf Stream, a powerful warm Atlantic Ocean current that acts like a river within the sea. This current moves more water per second than all of the world's terrestrial rivers combined, roughly 30 million cubic meters per second. It's an atmospheric engine that regulates Florida's climate, keeping the winters mild, while also steering major hurricanes toward or away from the coast. It's so fast, up to 5.6 miles per hour, that ships have used it to speed up their journeys for centuries. Fact 45. The largest subtropical wilderness in the U.S. The Everglades is a region often misunderstood as a swamp. Geographically, it's actually a river, a slow-moving, shallow sheet of water up to 60 miles wide, but only inches deep. Writer Marjorie Stoneman Douglas famously dubbed it the River of Grass. The water here moves so slowly that it takes months for a single drop of rain to travel from Lake Okeechobee down to the Florida Bay. It's the only place on Earth where
Wow.
alligators and crocodiles coexist in the wild.
Wait, that's crocodiles in Florida? I thought there was only alligators. I know. Wait, did I hear the Nile crocodile has been introduced somehow? Are they naturally occurring in Florida? Okay, good luck with that, I guess.
It's
Yikes.
the only place on Earth where alligators and crocodiles coexist in the wild. Fact 44. A river that's only 15 feet deep. Lake Okeechobee, the liquid heart of Florida, is massive, covering 730 square miles. It's the second largest freshwater lake entirely within the lower 48 states. Yet,
Dang.
it's astonishingly shallow. Its average depth is only about 9 feet, and even at its
Oh.
deepest, it rarely exceeds 12 to 15 feet. Geologically,
That's not-
it's more like a giant water-filled saucer than a traditional
Yeah.
lake bowl. This shallowness means that strong winds can whip the water into a frenzy, creating dangerous conditions in minutes. Fact 43. Rivers that flow underground. Florida sits atop a foundation of porous limestone, which acts like a hard, calcified sponge. This geology creates a karst landscape where surface water is constantly dissolved.
Kind of like what we learnt when we learnt about Missouri, kind of dissolving limestone and everything else. Jeez.
Sponge.
Yikes.
This geology creates a karst landscape where surface water is constantly dissolving the rock below. Consequently, Florida has massive underground rivers that flow through dark, water-filled caverns for miles. These subterranean waterways can carry more volume than some surface rivers,
Dang.
moving silently beneath the feet of millions of residents before bursting up through the ground as springs. Fact 42.
Okay.
The largest concentration of springs on Earth. Because of the pressure from the underground rivers we just mentioned, North and Central Florida are home to the highest concentration of large springs in the world. Over 1,000 of them. These are
When I think of springs out of the ground, Florida is not the first thing I'd think of. Okay, over 1,000. Damn.
home to the highest
Damn.
concentration of large springs in the world. Over 1,000 of them. These aren't small trickles. These are first magnitude springs, defined as discharging at least 64 million gallons of water per day. Springs like Silver Springs and Wakulla Springs are essentially windows into the aquifer, pumping out crystal clear water at a rate that defies imagination. Fact 41. The only coral reef in the continental U.S. The Florida Reef Tract is the third largest coral barrier reef system in the world and the only living coral reef attached to the continental United States.
Okay.
Stretching nearly 350 miles from St. Lucie Inlet to the Dry Tortugas, this reef is a geological wall that protects the Florida Keys from the raw power of the open ocean. Without this living wall of calcium carbonate, the Keys likely would have eroded away thousands of years ago.
Dang.
Fact 40. Islands that move. The barrier
Eh?
islands that line Florida's coasts, places like Sanibel, Captiva,
Huh?
and Amelia Island, are not static pieces of land. They're dynamic geological features composed of loose sand. Through a process called longshore drift, waves and currents constantly pick up sand from one end of the island and deposit it on the other.
I had this feeling that, when he said they were moving, it's like the island's actually floating away or something like that. Okay. That makes a little bit more sense. Okay.
Waves and currents
Damn.
constantly pick up sand from one end of the island and deposit it on the other. Over decades, these islands literally migrate, rolling over themselves and moving closer to or further from the mainland. A map of Florida's coast from 100 years ago looks significantly different than one today.
Damn.
Fact 39. The sand isn't just sand. If you visit the beaches of the Florida Panhandle, you'll notice the sand is blindingly white and squeaks when you walk on it.
Is it quartz or something like that? I think I've heard of beaches like that.
This isn't
Get
ground-up
really white.
seashells. It's nearly 100% pure quartz crystal.
Yeah.
This quartz was eroded from the Appalachian Mountains tens
Oh,
of
wow.
thousands of years ago and carried down to the Gulf of Mexico by the Apalachicola River.
Oh.
You're effectively walking on the pulverized remains of ancient mountain peaks. Fact 38.
Dang. We've got really white beaches here on some of our islands. And, you polish your gold and jewelry. I wonder if that's the same thing, but that's quartz. So I don't know. If anybody's ever done that, let me know in the comment section.
One of the longest coastlines in America. Depending on how you measure it, Florida has the second longest coastline in the United States, trailing only the massive state of Alaska. The general coastline is about 1,350 miles, but if you trace the tidal shoreline, wrapping around every bay, inlet and island. That number explodes to over 8,400 miles. That's enough shoreline to stretch from Florida to Japan. Fact 37. A state held together by mangroves. Along the southern coasts, the land is held together by trees. Florida has over 500,000 acres of mangrove forests.
Wow.
These trees are unique because they can thrive in saltwater. Their tangled, arching prop roots trap sediment and organic matter, literally building new land and stabilizing the coastline against hurricane storm surges. Without mangroves, much of southern Florida would simply wash away into the sea.
We get obviously a lot of mangroves here in Queensland as well. We used to use them when we were kids, go mud crab hunting. Massive big mud crabs, you get beautiful, beautiful mud crabs. So I don't know if you get mud crabs in America. So let me know. Be interesting to know.
Fact 36. Rivers that flow north. In the northern hemisphere, most major rivers flow south. However, the St. Johns River in Florida is one of the few major rivers in the U.S. that flows north. It begins in the marshlands of Indian River County and flows 310 miles north to empty into the Atlantic near Jacksonville. This happens because the elevation drop is incredibly subtle. The river drops less than 30 feet over its entire 310-mile length, making it one of the laziest rivers in the world.
That's flat.
Fact 35. Lakes born from sinkholes. Florida is dotted with thousands of circular lakes, particularly in the central ridge of the state.
See, when you get that dissolving limestone, Missouri says that they get a lot of sinkholes too. I'm not surprised. They get a lot here too.
Florida is dotted with thousands of circular lakes, particularly in the central ridge of the state. Most of these, including large ones like Lake Jackson near Tallahassee, were formed by sinkholes. The limestone bedrock collapsed, creating a depression that filled with groundwater and rain. Occasionally, the plug at the bottom of these lakes can fail during a drought, causing the entire lake to drain into the aquifer like water in a bathtub, leaving fish flopping on the mud.
Dang.
Fact 34. The Karst landscape beneath your feet. The entirety of the state is classified as a karst landscape. This means the ground is formed from soluble rocks like limestone and dolomite. Acidic rainwater slowly eats away at this rock over geologic time, creating a Swiss cheese network of voids. This is why sinkholes are so common in Florida. The earth is literally dissolving from the inside out, creating a dynamic topography that can change overnight. Fact 33. The state with 2 time zones. Florida is so wide from east to west that it spans 2 time zones. While most of the peninsula is on Eastern Time, the western half of the Panhandle, including major cities like Pensacola and Panama City, is on Central Time.
That would be bloody annoying. Same state but different times? Oh, that's annoying.
Panhandle, including major cities like Pensacola and Panama City, is on Central Time. The dividing line is the Apalachicola River. Crossing a bridge over this river can literally take you back in time by 1 hour. Fact 32. A river with crystal clear water. The Ichetucknee River is a geological marvel. It's fed almost entirely by 9 named springs that pump millions of gallons of aquifer water into the channel daily. Because the water has been filtered through miles of underground limestone, it's stripped of particulates and sediment. The result is water so clear that you can see the bottom perfectly, even in deep sections, making it a world-renowned destination for tubing and snorkeling. Fact 31. A lost coast unlike any other. In the area known as the Big Bend, where the Florida peninsula curves into the Panhandle, there are almost no sandy beaches. This is the Nature Coast, a vast expanse of salt marshes and seagrass. The geology here lacks the wave energy and sand supply to build beaches. Instead, the land simply fades into the water in a maze of tidal creeks and mudflats, creating one of the wildest and least developed shorelines in the continental U.S. Fact 30. The dry season and the wet season. While most of the U.S. operates on a 4-season cycle, winter, spring, summer, and fall, Florida's geography dictates a tropical 2-season cycle. From mid-October to May, the state experiences its dry season. Humidity drops, rain is rare, and wildfires become a risk. From June to September, the wet season takes over, characterized by near-daily thunderstorms, high humidity, and the ever-present threat of tropical cyclones. Fact 29. The lightning capital. Central Florida, specifically the corridor from Tampa to Orlando, is known as Lightning Alley. It experiences more cloud-to-ground lightning strikes per square mile than anywhere else in the United States. This is caused by Florida's unique geography. Sea breezes from the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico collide in the middle of the peninsula. This collision forces warm, moist air upward rapidly, creating massive cumulonimbus towers that act as atmospheric batteries. Fact 28. A chain of islands made from coral. The Florida Keys are geologically distinct from the rest of the state. The Upper Keys are composed of Key Largo limestone, which is simply the exposed remains of an ancient coral reef. If you look closely at rock walls or canal cuts in Key Largo, you can see the perfect fossilized shapes of brain coral and star coral that lived 125,000 years ago. You're literally driving across the bones of a prehistoric marine ecosystem. Fact 27. An ocean river beneath the ocean. We mentioned the Gulf Stream, but inside the Gulf of Mexico lies its parent current, the Loop Current. This current enters the Gulf through the Yucatan Channel, loops up toward the Florida Panhandle, and then exits through the Florida Straits. It acts as a deep, warm river that influences everything from red tide blooms to the intensity of hurricanes. It occasionally sheds massive eddies, swirling rings of warm water that drift westward across the Gulf. Fact 26. Dunes that sing in certain conditions. On rare occasions, the sand dunes along Florida's coast can produce a phenomenon known as singing sands. When the sand grains are of a specific size, shape, and silica content, and the humidity is just right, walking on them or sliding down them creates a low-frequency hum or high-pitched squeak. This is caused by the friction of the grains vibrating against.
Okay, I've heard that. We have that here. Okay, because as soon as he said it, I thought, okay, I think that's what they mean. But yeah, okay.
Frequency hum or high-pitched squeak. This is caused by the friction of the grains vibrating against each other in unison, a geological instrument played by the wind and your feet. We're halfway through our journey across the Sunshine State. Already, Florida has revealed underwater rivers, fossilized coral cities, and a coastline that rewrites itself with every storm. But there's much more waiting beneath the water, wind, and soil of this astonishing peninsula. Fact 25. Islands that rise and sink. In the shallow waters of Biscayne Bay, there are formations known as mangrove hummocks. These are small islands that start as a single tree. Over decades, they trap sediment and expand outward. However, they're fragile. A major hurricane can strip the vegetation, causing the soil to wash away and the island to essentially vanish or sink back below the waterline. It's a landscape that breathes in and out over the span of centuries. Fact 24. A hidden underwater canyon. Just offshore from Cape Canaveral, the continental shelf doesn't just slope gently away, it drops off a cliff. This is the East Florida Shelf Break. The bottom plunges from a few hundred feet to thousands of feet deep very rapidly. This geological wall forces nutrient-rich deep water toward the surface, creating a feeding frenzy for sport fish like marlin and sailfish, and creating the massive waves that make the East Coast a surfing destination compared to the calm Gulf. Fact 23. Florida has volcanoes. Sort of.
Wait, what?
While Florida has no igneous rocks or lava, scientists have discovered mud volcanoes deep in the Gulf of Mexico off Florida's coast. These aren't erupting magma. They're erupting methane gas and fluidized mud from deep beneath the seafloor. These cold seeps create strange, alien-like ecosystems where chemosynthetic tube worms and mussels live, thriving not on sunlight, but on the chemical energy of the leaking gas. Fact 22. Rivers with no beginning. If you try to find the headwaters of the Silver River or the Rainbow River, you won't find a trickle coming down a mountain. These rivers seem to appear out of nowhere, fully formed. That's because they're spring runs. The entire volume of the river bursts out of a single vent in the limestone aquifer. The Silver River, for example, is instantly a massive waterway capable of supporting steamboats, born from a hole in the ground. Fact 21. The world's largest seagrass bed. Florida Bay, located between the Everglades and the Florida Keys, along with the surrounding seagrass meadows, constitutes one of the largest contiguous seagrass beds on Earth. These underwater prairies are vital carbon sinks, trapping atmospheric carbon more efficiently than tropical rainforests. They also serve as the primary nursery for the spiny lobster and stone crab populations, making them the economic engine of the Florida seafood industry. Fact 20. A lake with its own microclimate. Lake Okeechobee is so massive, roughly 30 miles across, that it creates its own weather. In the summer, the water heats up and provides moisture that can spawn localized thunderstorms that don't exist in the surrounding counties. Conversely, in the winter, the thermal mass of the warm water keeps the immediate shoreline a few degrees warmer than the inland areas, protecting orange groves and sugarcane fields from frost. Fact 19. the only place where panthers still roam. The Florida panther
Panthers?
is a subspecies of the cougar and is the only breeding population of pumas in the eastern United States. Geographically, they're confined to a specific region of southwest Florida, a mosaic of cypress swamps, pine rocklands, and hardwood hammocks. This isolation has been their survival, but also their curse, as their range is hemmed in by the development of Miami to the east and Naples to the west. Fact 18, the Sandhill Ridge. Running down the spine of central Florida is the Lake Wales Ridge. To the untrained eye, it looks like rolling hills of sand and scrub. But geologically, these are ancient islands. Millions of years ago, when sea levels were much higher, this ridge was a chain of islands disconnected from North America. Because of this isolation, the ridge is home to dozens of plants and animals, like the Florida scrub jay, that evolved there and exist nowhere else on the planet. Fact 17. Underwater meadows of freshwater grass. Florida's spring-fed rivers, like the Ichetucknee and the Wassissa, are home to vast underwater meadows of eelgrass, or Vallisneria. These grasses wave in the current like wheat in a field. They're crucial for the geography of the river because their roots stabilize the loose sandy bottom, preventing the river from becoming a muddy mess. They also provide the primary food source for the West Indian manatee during the winter months. Fact 16. The state with the most tidal coastline on the East Coast. Because of the intricate nature of Florida's geography, the thousands of bays, the jagged inlets, the winding mangrove channels, the state has an incredible amount of interface between land and sea. While the flight distance from Jacksonville to Key West is about 400 miles, tracing the actual tidal edge of that journey would take you thousands of miles, creating a massive surface area for biological filtration and interaction. Fact 15. A coastline that glows. The Indian River Lagoon and Mosquito Lagoon on the East Coast are home to high concentrations of bioluminescent dinoflagellates. In the summer months, these microscopic plankton emit light when disturbed. The geography of the lagoons, shallow, slow-moving, and protected from the ocean, allows these populations to explode. At night, fish leave glowing trails like comets, and a paddle dipped in the water looks like it's been dipped in blue liquid fire. Fact 14. A massive underwater cave system. Northern Florida is essentially a block of Swiss cheese. Places like Devil's Den, Ginny Springs, and Peacock Springs are merely the entrances to vast underwater cave systems. Divers have mapped tens of miles of these tunnels, some of which connect different surface springs together underground. It's one of the most complex aquifer systems in the world, drawing technical cave divers from every continent to explore its dangerous beauty.
Cave diving underwater? Nah, not for me. Not for me.
Fact 13. A river that disappears. The Santa Fe River in north central Florida performs a magic trick. At Olino State Park, the entire river swirls into a massive sinkhole and vanishes. It travels underground for more than 3 miles through a limestone cavern system before erupting back to the surface at a place called the River Rise. This natural land bridge formed by the river's disappearance allowed early settlers to cross the waterway without needing a ferry. Fact 12. One of the largest estuaries in North America. Tampa Bay is not just a harbor. It's a massive estuary spanning roughly 400 square miles. Geographically, it's a drowned river valley. As sea levels rose after the last ice age, the ocean invaded the river basin. Today, the bay creates a mixing zone, where freshwater from the Hillsborough and Lafayette rivers mix with saltwater from the Gulf, creating a salt wedge that supports over 200 species of fish and one of the busiest ports in the country. Fact 11. The Everglades depend on slow rainfall. The geography of the Everglades is entirely dependent on the sky. Florida receives an average of 50 to 60 inches of rain a year. Because the land is so flat, this water doesn't run off quickly. It sits. This residence time allows the water to slowly seep south. If the geography were steeper, the water would rush to the sea, and the Everglades, along with the aquifer that provides drinking water for millions, would simply dry up and cease to exist. Fact 10. The Keys are slowly submerging. The Florida Keys are uniquely vulnerable.
I was kind of thinking, there's obviously a lot of caves and a lot of, delicate things going on in Florida, to that balance. But I wonder if all of Florida is sinking, not just the Keys. So I wouldn't be surprised.
10. The Keys are slowly submerging. The Florida Keys are uniquely vulnerable to geography. Because they're porous limestone islands, building seawalls often doesn't work. The water simply bubbles up through the ground from below. During king tides, exceptionally high seasonal tides, many streets in Key Largo and Key West flood with salt water, even on sunny days. Geologists estimate that as sea levels rise, the geography of the Keys will shift from a chain of islands to a series of submerged shoals. Fact 9. The powerful loop current feeds hurricanes. We mentioned the loop current earlier, but its relationship to hurricanes is terrifying. This deep, warm water has a high ocean heat content. When a hurricane passes over the loop current, it hits a reservoir of high-octane fuel. This geographic feature is often responsible for the rapid intensification of storms, turning a Category 1 hurricane into a Category 4 or 5 monster overnight as it approaches the Florida Panhandle or West Coast.
Dang.
Fact 8. The state with the most islands east of the Mississippi. Florida's geography includes over 4,500 islands greater than 10 acres in size. This includes the famous 10,000 Islands region in southwest Florida, a labyrinth of mangrove islets that's almost impossible to navigate without a chart. These islands are constantly changing, growing as mangroves trap sediment or disappearing as storms wash them away, making accurate mapping a constant challenge. Fact 7. Underwater fossil beds. Because Florida's rivers cut through layers of sediment laid down over millions of years, they're treasure troves for paleontologists. Divers in the Peace River or the Suwannee River frequently find the teeth of megalodons, the bones of mammoth, and the shells of giant armadillos called glyptodonts. The geography of the riverbeds acts as a fossil trap, collecting the history of the Ice Age in the dark, tannin-stained water. Fact 6. The tidal range is small, but powerful. Compared to the Bay of Fundy or Alaska, Florida's tidal range is small, usually only 2 to 3 feet. However, because the state's so flat, that small vertical rise translates to a massive horizontal movement of water. A 2-foot tide can push water thousands of feet inland into the salt marshes. This tidal prism is the heartbeat of the coast, flushing out pollutants and bringing in nutrients twice a day. Fact 5. Florida holds rare tropical hardwood forests. On the higher ground of the Florida Keys, you find rockland hammocks or tropical hardwood forests. These are not temperate forests like oaks or pines. They contain trees like the gumbo limbo, the tourist tree with peeling red skin, poisonwood, and mahogany. Geographically, this is the northernmost limit for many of these Caribbean species. They exist here only because the warm Gulf Stream buffers them from the freezing temperatures of the North American continent. Fact 4. A massive freshwater lens under the Keys. Despite being surrounded by the salty Atlantic and Gulf, the larger islands of the Florida Keys, like Big Pine Key, float on top of a freshwater lens. Because freshwater is less dense than saltwater, rainwater sits on top of the salty groundwater in a bubble or lens shape. This fragile geographic feature allows deer, raccoons, and pine forests to survive on islands that are otherwise surrounded by undrinkable ocean. Fact 3. A coastline of constant creation. In most parts of the world, coastlines are eroding. In parts of Florida, the coastline is advancing. In the 10,000 Islands and Florida Bay, red mangroves drop their propagules or floating seeds into the shallow water. Once they take root, they trap mud and sand. Over time, this builds soil levels up above the high tide line, effectively creating new land from the ocean. Florida is literally growing its own geography, one root at a time. Fact 2. A peninsula made for storms. Florida's geography makes it the world's premier target for tropical cyclones. It's a long, narrow peninsula sticking 400 miles out into tropical waters, separating the Atlantic from the Gulf. This means a storm can approach from the east, west, or south. It's often called the bowling alley of the tropics. There's almost no point in the state that's more than 60 miles from the ocean, meaning no inland area is truly safe from the effects of a massive hurricane. Fact 1. A landscape still being born. The most profound fact about Florida is that it's not finished. The limestone is still dissolving to create new springs. The mangroves are still building new islands. The sea level is rising to reshape the coastline. And the coral is, hopefully, regenerating. Florida is not a static piece of rock. It's a living, breathing, and rapidly changing mosaic. It's a geography that demands respect because it's being sculpted by the wind and the water every single day. Florida is far more than just sunny beaches and vacation destinations. It's a geological marvel, a place where ancient coral reefs support modern cities, where rivers disappear into the earth and reappear miles away, and where entire ecosystems thrive on land that's constantly reshaping itself. It's a state defined by water, held together by roots, and alive with geological wonder. If this journey opened your eyes to a new side of the Sunshine State, be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and tell us in the comments, which Florida fact surprised you the most? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next adventure around the world.
I tell you what, I think he hit the nail on the head there. You know, Florida is definitely a water state, not just because it's surrounded by water, but the water that's underneath the state as well, too, you know. So, as I say, you know, it's a delicate balance of keeping the state together. You know, you're basically, you know, as I said, you know, on dead coral and skeletons and the skeletons of the coral and everything else. It's almost a very delicate state, but one that kind of balances at the moment. So, but I guess you get that big shift, and who knows what's going to happen. You know, it's only 100 meters above sea level on average, which isn't very much at all. So 100 feet, I should say, not 100 meters. But there is a lot, you know, it's kind of reminds me of Missouri when we did that, you know, video in Missouri, you know, the dissolving limestone, the springs and everything, the caverns, the caves, but very interesting. I wouldn't have thought that much when you think about, you know, I obviously don't know much about Florida. It kind of reminds me of Queensland a little bit, you know, we're Sunshine State, we're down by the beach. Almost everybody lives, you know, within, you know, 30, 50 kilometers of the beach, at least the coastline anyway. So, but we kind of get the same weather as Florida here as well. It's a little hotter up as you go, but very, very different though. Very, very different geology, Queensland to Florida. Kind of Florida's out there, stuck out there. You know, it's got the Gulf of Mexico on one side and the Atlantic Ocean that's been battered by each side. It is a very delicate balance of trying to keep that water at bay, trying to keep the water underneath it at bay as well too. But be interesting to see how. I don't think they were right about the 130 years ago. I think they mean 130,000 maybe. If the corals died and it's now calcified, I think they mean a little bit longer than that. But that was very interesting. A lot of water in Florida, obviously, you know, given the fact it is a peninsula, but underneath it as well, all those sinkholes with the fresh water and everything else. Yeah, I don't know. You never know what's underneath your feet, you know, wherever you live as well too. So fascinating state, geology wise at the, you know, what we've learned. So, but very interesting facts. So let me know if you enjoy, and if you do know if crocodiles are naturally occurring in Florida, which I didn't think they were. Let me know in the comment section, guys. Thank you very much for joining me today. Make sure you stay safe, and I'll definitely see you in the next reaction video. Oh, you're still here? You want more content? Why don't you check out my Patreon down here? You'll get plenty more content and some exclusive videos over there too. If not, why not check out this one over here?